small content providers who are providing us with great digital content, but they want, or teachers actually want to get their rosters into those tools, and they want to be able to do the mini assessments within those tools. And so it's good to adhere to some guidelines and some established guidelines when you're working with those companies. And if you're a leader on this webinar, you're going to want to give some guidance to your staff and to your teachers on just what the best practices are when they're considering a tool to disseminate. And then what we're working towards as an industry is a platform that helps ensure that the right guidelines are provided. There are a lot of click-through agreements that a lot of people go through sometimes to agree to something and get using a technology product. There was an incident in a local district here in Massachusetts where the students were reskinning all of their iPad keyboards, and they were clicking through, and it turns out that if you actually read the agreement, they said they would collect all the keystrokes that were occurring on the iPad. So very interesting that you guys are shaking your head. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay. So they were actually recording keystrokes of the students, and so there had to be a big a big announcement to bring that back. And so in order to avoid that, sometimes it's good to have a conversation about what people are talking about in your professional circles that can tell you can keep teachers informed about what's safe and what's not. So I think with that, adhering to some certain standards when you're talking with content providers or service providers like the picture company, for instance. What is the district policy on the information that you're providing to them, and what are they going to use it for? Just the same way that you would be concerned when you're being asked for your telephone number and an email address, and you don't want it distributed by certain providers. And then there's the content or service providers for assessments. What's happening with the assessments, what is happening to the information that's being collected on those students? Are those students being identified in any way? So as you know, there's been some movement by the COSIN organization and by the CIFA organization across the country, or CIFA is now called A4L, and they have adopted a student data privacy agreement that was developed between Cambridge and Boston at one point in time, and they have quite a database of providers that have agreed to certain standards on how they would use student data. Because the design is, as an industry, we want to make sure that the ed tech industry can leverage data effectively to make better products to meet our needs. But at the same time, we want them to make sure that our students' privacy is protected and our students can't be identified. So it's a very fine line to walk, and the definitions can be blurred. But we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can to ensure protection. And as technologists, like Angela and Casey and the others in the room, and myself, we want educational technology to be the best it can be and provide the best outcomes and the best services to enhance learning in our schools and our learning communities. So those are key factors to keep in mind when you're thinking about your ecosystem as a whole. And then the more that you can federate into your ecosystem, the better. Creating a standardized platform by which you can have folks connect to, and therefore ensuring safe delivery of content back and forth. And I'm referring to either using standards, something as simple as single sign-on, where we want people to either use login with Google or Active Directory or LDAP, to moving that bar up to saying, we want them to adhere to standards like one roster, where we can move the class roster to a tool and the grades back from the tool safely into our student information system. And then down the, as we grow out that platform, we're going to want to be able to apply more analytics. So our analytics providers obviously are going to have access to a lot of our data in order to provide us with great analytics. So we're going to want that in some sort of walled garden as well. I mean, something like EdFi or an operational data store of some kind. So I think there's a lot that to be taken into consideration, and some of the work that's being done by the ESAs here, at least in Massachusetts, and I know across the country, this conversation goes on to build out, best practices and guidelines around those areas. Oh, we have a question. Thank goodness. How do you handle applications that may require a Google or Facebook account to create an account? So, and I think that's an opportunity of Google integration. Making sure that you can use the Google API, because that assures a certified connection. And then obviously is, when you apply a Google account, it kind of tells you what they want to do, what kind of access they want to have in your Google account, and what they're going to do with those access to those Google emails. So obviously we don't want anybody, emailing our students directly. I think that'd be a gigantic no-no. And I haven't heard about the people using Facebook officially from a school level, although I'm sure it's happening, particularly in the parent communities. Obviously, Facebook is a very convenient way for our parent groups to organize and communicate with each other. I know that I'm on my son's class of 2029 Facebook page, and I hear all the major concerns on pencil quality and class size. So, there's always an avenue for Facebook, although I don't think we want to kind of, I don't know, I'm steering away from Facebook in the, within my schools and the schools that I advise. So how about a better question? Good question. That was a great question. Don't get me wrong.
What about the products that sort of require a Google login and the school is an Office 365 school?
I would advise that product.
Get around that.
I would advise that product to adhere to Office 365. So that's an excellent question. And there's always a feedback loop these days. I think it's not that I have a technical workaround for that, which I'm sure there probably is one. But there is there generally the younger companies, not in the people who staff them, but in the age of their companies, or companies that are agile. They are working towards, if they're using Google login, they're going to be probably using Office 365. But it's probably only a matter of time, if they don't have it yet, that they would be. And that's also another way to kind of, I would hate to characterize a product and its offerings, about where they're putting their money in development. Obviously, it's good to have a good quality product, but the importance of that, that quality access to that product is also important. So, and I can give you for instance, where an ebook company called Big Universe, which has a great collection of ebooks at an affordable price, you still had to do individual email connections, create the accounts by hand. Now, that ensured that nobody else was getting a hold of our information in transit. However, it wasn't good as far as single sign-on goes. So unless you're using a third-party single sign-on tool like ClassLink, something along those lines.
Clever. How about in terms of people are asking, is the Office 365 platform a safer platform than Google?
I think they both have a focus on security. I can't say I could pick one over the other. I think that they're both for-profit companies, and we can read their privacy policies, equally, and they're both kind of jockeying for exposure to the education space, shall we say, and growing the services that they're providing. And so I would I know that Google is one of the companies that has not signed that student data privacy agreement that we discussed, and I'm not sure if Microsoft has either. However, it is something to keep an eye on about where that data is going, because both of those companies are offering something called some sort of school data sync product in the future, meaning that they will provision accounts into Microsoft AD right out of your student information system, as well as Google is starting to do the same. And so, which means that when you create a new student in your student information system and you check the box to enroll them, an account will be created for them in either Google or Office 365, or in some cases both. And so, because of that instantaneous access, I think there is some cause for pause, or at least awareness of how that works, what protocols are being used to make that happen, and just how that information is leaving, your possession into their possession and getting back. So as long as you are fully aware of how that's working and what security measures are put in place, I haven't heard any terrible stories yet about that working or not working. But of course, we do this because we're trying to increase and streamline the access to all that digital content. So, we have to weigh the two, weigh the pros and the cons to what it is we're trying to accomplish. So the more we can make the technology disappear for our users and be seamless, the better it is for their learning, of course.
Is it the student privacy pledge? Is that what you're referring to?
I think it might be, yes.
Google and Microsoft have both signed.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, good. So that's fantastic. Well, at the time, that was Stephen Smith from Cambridge was having a difficult time getting Google to sign it. So I'm glad they've come around, because it wasn't. It was designed purposefully to not restrict innovation, and I thought it was. It had a lot of input from a lot of different people, a lot of local Massachusetts people, in fact. But they, and I think that was one of the things to ensure, that people not, be able to sign it or not sign it. And working with startup companies myself, it's something that I bring to the table during that development process. If they're taking in data and they don't need the names for any particular reason, you need to hash those names out on the collection process, right? You just want the end result. You really don't care about the actual student name. So hashing that data on the way in ensures that you're not making yourself as a company liable for housing that data as well.
Okay. You talked a little bit before about EdFi. Do you want to explain a little bit about what EdFi is?
Sure. So some years ago, there was a little project going on in New York City. We know it as In Bloom, where they made a very intricate data system that allowed to track student progress. And it was using, a wide variety of assessments. And that foundation that was built, that database was built on, were the underpinnings, what's called EdFi. And EdFi is an open source data model that's funded by the the Dell Foundation, and it's based in Austin, Texas. And they do give it away for free, and there are some certain consulting companies that you can work with in setting it up. But essentially, it operates with having something called an operational data store, which, think of it more of as an address book for where your data lives. And it does store data, current data, shall we say, that's specified by you. But then in-depth over longitudinal data is, they know where it's stored, because you're going to connect systems like your student information system or your library catalog, or anything that might have usage data. And when you layer over an analytics tool over it, then you can start seeing the power of how you can correlate aggregated data together. So, things like Johnny really scores well on math when he has pizza for lunch. So because you've connected the lunch database, and and you know when the math tests are occurring, so that you know they happen after lunch, and things of that nature. So it was trying to do some pattern recognition over time, and that's not to scare anybody, but the reality is it does allow us to get better learning analytics when you start aggregating data on something like EdFi. Oh, you gotta turn your mic back on, sorry.
Does anyone in the audience have any additional questions?
Oh, come on. I'll change my name again.
We have a quiet panel here.
Nothing from Edco? I saw them on the list.
Yeah, Jim is on.
Calling him out. He just woke up.
No questions.
No questions at all.
Okay, we are going to go up to Casey Daigle Matos now. You can drive.
Did you share the screen yet?
No.
All right. Hi, folks. I'm Casey Daigle here from the Collaborative for Educational Services, and I am going to share my screen. What I'm going to do. We'll see how this goes. So, wait, Angela, how do I get the other one?
Click on the Chrome icon. Right.
All right. So the first thing that we're going to show you all is this new resource out from Google. So it's called Be Internet Awesome. Basically, they have pulled together a number of they've created some really excellent resources around digital citizenship and online safety for students. So what they've done, they have this multi-pronged approach where there's a game that students can play called Interland, which is a lot of fun and guides students through a few different worlds related to internet safety. So there's an entire world where you're collecting letters and trying to basically defeat a hacker by coming up with a really strong password. There's another one where your job is to go through and basically spread kindness online and stop bullies by reporting them to trusted adults. But the games are pretty fun. They're fairly challenging, which is sort of exciting. I thought they were going to be super easy, and they were not. So those are there for you. And then they have a related curriculum that they've created for like face-to-face classrooms. So this is the piece that's really, I think, most powerful here, because there are some excellent conversation starters and strategies and lessons for getting these conversations happening in classrooms. So I really recommend that folks take a peek at those. And they also went ahead and they basically have like 5 sort of core skills that they want students to be able to do here, which I'm not able to show you in this moment because internet. But basically they want students to be doing things where they're sharing carefully, right? They're being really thoughtful about it. They're making sure that they're not falling for phishing scams. They're taking responsibility for protecting important information. And when they talk about important information, of course, it's passwords, but it's also, information about your family, information about your life at school and outside of school. They have a whole section on the importance of being kind and spreading positivity and using basically your powers for good when you're online. And then the last one is to know that when you're not sure of what you ought to be doing, that you can go ahead and talk it out with a trusted adult. So those are the 5. And all of that is tied up in this sort of Be Internet Awesome program out of Google. So if you can just do a quick search for Be Internet Awesome, you will find all of the resources there. They have a bunch of printable materials and digital materials that are really excellent. And I should peek to see if anybody has questions on Zoom. Okay, none yet. So I will go on to the next one here. Google also has a really solid digital citizenship course for adults. So you can see there's multiple lessons here that talk about why you want to be teaching this in your classroom, how to teach it in your classroom. They are not long. There's just a few of them. There's 6 units, but they're really solid. And I really recommend this is a nice complement to the Be Internet Awesome content that they've been putting out. So some other resources that just may be useful to you, and we will get these to folks after this webinar, is there's a nice little printable resource put out by the Family Online Safety Institute, who worked with Google on the Be Internet Awesome. And so it's a nice little, I'll just see if I can pull it up here. It's a little poster to sort of remind you of some things that you can do to take a little bit more control of your digital footprint. So it's just a short little checklist where you can go through and try doing these things, but you can, of course, hang it on the wall as a reminder for yourself, your students, your colleagues, etc. The last item on this list is the grid. This I thought would be interesting for the conversations that you might be having with your colleagues and students around digital citizenship and sort of what online safety looks like globally. So here you can come, you can go through and just sort of choose a location. You can choose any country. And then when you do that, you can get into particular states. And then I'm going to come down here to Massachusetts. And when we look at Massachusetts, it gives us some really basic data about some statistics about internet use in the region. But then when you go in and start looking at legislations and research, and what education looks like, it gives you like a nice little timeline to get a sense of what legislation around online safety has looked like in each state, in these many countries. Yep, so those are there for you. I think that that could be a really fun way to have some conversation going. Oh, we have a question from Jim Sullivan. Does the Be Internet Awesome have different age categories, or is it a one-size-fits-all design? It is a one-size-fits-all design. My sense on the curriculum itself is that it's really adaptable because it's largely about just sort of these sort of conversation starters. So I think that you could do a lot there, but it is geared toward a younger audience in terms of the game itself and some of the content in the curriculum. Okay, we're back on the grid. And then the last thing that I want to sort of say here is, if you have not, there's, we'll add this to the list, but there's an excellent podcast called Note to Self, and they fairly recently did a 5-part series called The Privacy Paradox. And the privacy paradox was really cool because it was geared toward adults, but it was largely thinking about what we're willing to give up of our privacy to get the services that we receive. And so it really walked you through with some challenges and some contextual information, really good experts, guiding you through what kind of information your phone knows about you. What is your sort of shadow life on online when you have all of those myriad websites where you created the account and then no longer go back to that place. But it's nice because it's structured in really short segments with very attainable sort of challenges that are fun to do. I found the entire process really illuminating when I went through and did it. So that's Note to Self. And that was their Privacy Paradox series, which we will add the link to. Are there...
Did you want to show the student privacy pledge?
Oh, sure. Yep. So I will sort of open this up for any questions. I know I'm mostly just sharing resources here. And while we wait for those questions, I'm going to pull up that privacy pledge that Leo was talking about, because there's a nice little page that shows you all of the folks who have signed it. Maybe I'm doing that. Can I go there? You got it? Oh.
Now you just have to share your screen.
I know. I took.
Wait. 986 629.
We now have a Patriots conversation happening in the side in the chat window. All right. So this was the student privacy pledge. I think that Leo was referencing. So you can go through here. There's a lot of organizations that have signed it. And it is apparently a legally binding agreement when they do sign. So, but you can come through here and find all of the people and links out to their web pages. All right.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any questions about something other than the Patriots? Because I have no information about what's happening this weekend. All right. I'm going to do stop share and
Now Suzanne joined.
so they can share the.
You can't. Hold on. Just a minute. And then you need to mute your microphone and all that.
Hi. Oh, no. All right, here we go. Sorry. So hi, everyone. I'm Suzanne Judson Whitehouse, and I have the pleasure of working with Casey and Angela here. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about some work that we've done recently in looking at information literacy online. Particularly when it comes to fake news. So a couple of months ago, we did a webinar here about fake news, and I just wanted to share some of the things that we shared via that webinar. Hopefully it's not redundant for folks. So one of the things I want to mention is, you know, fake news just generally is what it is and is not. So fake news is not information that conflicts with what you think you already know. It's not satire or humor, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. And it's not necessarily propaganda. Really what fake news is news that's made up and designed specifically to deceive people and to create web traffic. So defining fake news in that way takes it out of what might possibly be a political discussion and brings it into a very neutral space where it can, where you can really reach out and connect with all of your students, regardless of what they or their family's political affiliation is. So one thing I want to share with you it's a really cool tool that that is a Chrome extension is the Fake News Monitor, and that's a Chrome extension. And I'll just show you a little bit of what the Fake News Monitor looks like. So I have it installed on my Chrome here. And here I've pulled up the New York Times as a website. And if you look over in the top part of my screen, the top right-hand part, I get a little circle with a check mark in it. And when I click on it, it tells me how it scored, if it leans politically one way or the other. But it does say that this site has not been flagged. Again, reassuring students that they should always be fact-checking their sources. And if you need to report anything, you can do that here. Another website that I've pulled up here is one of my favorite satire sites, The Onion. The Onion, if you look up in the top corner, you can see here, it's been flagged as a satire website, and please don't take it seriously. So this can be a way that you can help students kind of support that decision-making process. Looks like we've got a couple of, I don't know if they're questions in the chat window or if they are discussions of.
I answered.
Okay, great, thanks, Angela, appreciate it. I don't want to interfere with anybody's desire to discuss the PATs, so. All right. So those are a couple of tools that we've talked about. Another thing that we talked a lot about, and I'm pretty passionate about, and also I know Casey is as well, is talking to students in the context of them being content creators. And so when you talk about fake news, but when you talk about information literacy, what we're talking about is setting students up to become future, not just consumers of content, but also creators of content. So those are important discussions to have at just about any level with students. And you can have them as early as kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade and beyond. I think it's also a great discussion to have with teachers and other staff people in your schools. So I want to mention a couple of things. The Creative Commons folks, so those are, that's an international movement where people create content and share it under specific circumstances. And this can be a great discussion starter for students about how the creator of the content has ultimate control over how their content is shared. So I encourage folks to check out this, and this is another link that we'll make sure gets shared with everyone. Creative Commons, their stuff is great. I did include a link in here to the Common Sense Media site. I'm fairly certain that most of you are familiar with that, but their digital citizenship materials are really without equal. And one of the things that I just want to mention and highlight about the Common Sense Media folks is that their materials, they have a number of materials that open up the door and the conversation to parents and other community members. And so bringing parents into that discussion really provides a space where you can create consistent messages that students are receiving about what is appropriate use of technology and media, you know, obviously within the variability of what different families allow and so on. But really students, if you can align those things, students can really get consistent messages. And so they're hearing the same things at school that they're hearing at home. And all of those things will help support them to become really great digital decision makers. So does anybody have any questions? Great, thanks.
Okay, since you were all such, okay, we have a question. What do you do in your agency to work with students on digital literacy?
The question for us.
That's a question for us. Sponsor any symposiums. There's always can't hear. Okay. Did anybody hear anything of what I said?
So you can repeat
Oh,
yourself.
great. I can repeat myself. My favorite thing to do is talk. So one of the things that I mentioned is the Technology and Education Conference, the annual conference that we sponsor here in Western Mass. And this past year, there was an unconference session where people wanted to talk about fake news. And so we talked about it at the conference, and then the webinar that we developed came out of that discussion. People wanted to talk more about it. So we definitely talk about that. We have a library and media specialist PLC. It's often, digital literacy is often a topic at that. That meets monthly. And then we do offer workshops and trainings kind of in response to demand, really. When people are really interested and districts are interested in having getting groups of people together to talk about those issues.
But when we do that, we always include a panel of students so that the group can sort of pepper them with questions, but that we can hear from them what they actually want in their schools, what they actually want around the decision making that's happening around policies, and how all of that impacts their lives as digital citizens in their schools.
So Beth asked anything specifically for students. We don't have any, our training focus really at the collaborative in the professional development area really focuses on, sort of teachers and staff. And then also, I'm sure that our teachers in DYS and SAIS, I know for a fact that they have those conversations all the time with their teachers about having them with their students. And Tech Academy, which is here in Northampton.
I think that any of the administrators and teachers there could speak much more intelligently about what they do with their students than the folks in this room where we're focused on the professional learning.
We do have Beth Caves and Cubish and from Nebraska, and she is going to share what Nebraska does with their students.
We do have it's called a Digital Citizen Symposium. I have not necessarily worked closely with those people that organize it, but how it is organized is they will have remote sites throughout the state of Nebraska, and students then or schools will bring in a team of students to those remote sites, and then they connect 3 or 4 sites across Nebraska and do it's basically a workshop for those kids, but they actually bring teams in to the local service agency, and then able to do some activities, share some of the resources like what you were sharing today. But then the next step of those teams that are brought into the service agency is to go back to their school district and present to their peers, present to the rest of the student body about what they learned at the school symposium. So it's a really interesting way to think about how to engage students in this conversation, and then to really give them back the responsibility to share with their peers and share with their friends and so forth. So it's been going on for a number of years in Nebraska, and if you are interested, I can certainly get you in touch with the coordinator or the person that puts it together for Nebraska. But it's very exciting to see those kids go back to their district and share what they learned and have those conversations.
That is so wonderful. I love the idea of students being ambassadors, right? And bringing that back to their peer group and becoming, leaders in those conversations, because I think there's a huge level of trust that adults don't always have, right? Like, we don't live the same lives that our students do in most cases. And the other thing that I just want to say is, particularly when you're working in areas of the country where students who are very what's the word I want to say, sort of addressing challenges in their own life or addressing certain things, they can find support for that work, and that maybe they're not able to ask for in real life, but maybe they're able to find support for that in an online community. And I just want to say that is one of the great things about the online world. And if we can support that and balance that with some great support around around digital literacy and understanding what the challenges are for students to understand what the challenges are, they can really find some great support in online communities. Jeff asked about the common sense lessons in Nearpod. I have not looked at Nearpod because I tend to go into Common Sense Media and use their supporting materials and their process sort of offline, and use it a lot with adult learners, so parents and community members, staff, and teachers. But Casey, did you have something about the Nearpod?
Last year we went through and looked pretty closely at a lot of the Nearpod digital citizenship materials, that partnership with Common Sense Media, and we were really impressed by it. But we were looking at it in, you know, like a fully sort of hypothetical, just for evaluative purposes, to see if this is something we would recommend that folks look at. But I would happily recommend this to any school that was interested in engaging in these kinds of conversations.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for participating today. Oops, we have one. Evan Abbey from Iowa, they have repackaged Common Sense Media into e-curricular that they offer for students in the Iowa schools. Evan, I am going to promote you to a panelist if you want to talk about a little bit about how you've done that.
Gonna make me sit up and everything here.
Yes, I am. Sorry, Evan.
We have one of the services we offer is we provide e-curriculum on a variety of different granular sizes for schools so that they can turn around and offer that for their own blended learning, personalized learning, even online learning for their own classes. We have for a while, we've packaged the Common Sense Media into an instructional package, not just resources, but think of it as a mini course, not a full Carnegie unit, but a mini course around digital citizenship. And we had that available for learning management systems that they could, you know, plug into their Canvas or Moodle server or whatever they'd like. Since then, we've in Iowa, we have developed a separate system for personalized learning. So it's a personalized learning management system that allows students to basically go in and elect their own mini courses from a catalog and take that and use that and go through it in a self-paced manner. And so that's how we're distributing that content primarily. People can access it, I guess, in different ways, but primarily students will go in, they're either assigned this or they'll elect to take it, and when they're done, there are assignments that are submitted as part of the regular class or can be submitted online if it's not part of the curriculum, because digital citizenship is, in Iowa at least, often outside of the scope of class time. Like, oh yeah, this is something else you got to fit in, but you don't have any time to do it. Just like financial literacy and, you know, civic literacy and everything else. And then, so they could elect to take it, or it could be assigned to them, or such. We have taken that and we've used the different resources from Common Sense Media to break that down to different age levels. So we have a high school, a middle school, an intermediate, and we even have a primary, which is read aloud and simplified. So that's how we do it in Iowa.
That's just, what system are you using for the personalized learning management?
We've developed our own. We've been delivering our own self-paced professional development since about 2002 in Iowa. And about 3 years ago, districts were saying, you know, this is great. You offer, you know, 100,000 trainings every year through this system. Would you ever do this for students? Like, yeah, why not? So we copied the system and now we offer that, and it has a variety of different courses and other, we call them learning opportunities because they're range in size, everything from small to large. So, yeah.
Great, that's fascinating. Anyone else want to share what you're doing in your state? Okay, then, just sort of as in closing, on the NAMTC website, we will be posting the recording of this video as well as the Google Docs that were presented throughout that have the links to all of the resources that we discussed. If you have any other questions or you would like to share anything, my email is aburke@collaborative.org, and I'll type it here in the chat. So if people have any questions or want to get in touch with some of the people that they heard from today, let me know and I can facilitate that. Thank you all for attending, and happy Tuesday.